Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Calvin Wazoo, which I never explained why my channel is called that. So quickly, when it comes to my vinyl, I collect a lot of Frank Zappa. He is the one artist that I am interested in getting just about everything I can that has ever been pressed in vinyl and also on CD. I also have an external hard drive that has a ton of bootleg concert recordings, some of which he ended up turning into official releases. So Calvin Wazoo, Wazoo from the Grand Wazoo, and then of course there's a song about Calvin on that album as well. So that's where the name comes from. So I thought I would put that out there. But this episode here is about the albums of my decades. There's some other vloggers who have been doing this kind of thing. So they talk about, records they own that came out the year they were born, the year that they were 10, etc. And so that sounded like a pretty good idea for me to do. And so I started making a list of all the albums for each of these decades. And just for the decade that I am 10 years old, was a lot of records released, and I have them. So today, this is going to be part one, and I'm just going to go through the albums of the year that I was born, and then the decade when I was 10 years old. All right, so we'll get started here. Just freshen my palate a little bit. All right, so we'll start off with my birth year, 1958. Oh my God, he's an old man. Yeah, old rock and rollers, man. We saw all the great shows. So in that birth year, I was kind of surprised at some really great albums that were released, and a few of which I have, and there are others I want to get. But I was really pleased and surprised to see that this one was there for 1958, John Coltrane, Blue Train. It is one of my favorite John Coltrane albums. And the neat thing about this one is that I got this reissue that very cool red vinyl. It sounds great because, you try and find any of the original recordings of this. It's like, oh, we're talking expensive. Also, a very good album that was released that year was Cannonball Adderley, Something Else. And the cool thing about this, it's Cannonball Adderley, but he's got Miles Davis on here, Hank Jones, Sam Jones, and Art Blakey doing the drums. So, I mean, this is the cool thing about a lot of the early jazz albums, is, man, they all played together. And so, yeah, you get your Miles Davis, you get your John Coltrane, but then also you should be looking up people like Cannonball Adderley and Art Blakey and many of these other musicians. So those are the only two that I have from my birth year, but there were a lot of others. For example, Soul Train, John Coltrane's Soul Train was also released during my birth year. I don't have that, but it is one I want. So now we move on to my decade when I was 10 years old. And there was a lot of good music that I have that was released in 1968. So we'll start off first with Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland. It's my favorite. Maybe the debut album is really good too. I know a lot of people like Axis Bold as Love, and I like that too. But I mean, Voodoo Child. It's that and Oh, 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be. That whole sequence, um, crosstown traffic. But Voodoo Child, A Slight Return, classic, classic. Moving on. Rolling Stones, Beggars Banquet. This is the big major re-release that they did. This is like the next cover that they did, but when it was originally released, let's see if I can pull this out. We got this is just a sleeve, so we've got the original cover too. So great album. This is a major turning point for the Stones because this was right after their Satanic Majesty's request, and Brian Jones was gone, and it was just such a dramatic shift in direction for the Stones. But this really is the starting point of the modern bluesy rocky. They kind of returned to their blues route, but at the same time, their sound just became so iconic, so recognizable. And that was, right. And then after that, Brian Jones also died shortly afterward. Another one from 1968, the Beatles' White Album. A great album, certainly one that should be in everyone's collection. There's a lot of discussion recently about whether, this double album, you could trim it down and get rid of some of the songs. Revolution Number 9 is probably the most often cited song as one to cut from the album because, like, what the hell's going on here? But it's I like it. I like all the songs. It's well paced in my opinion. But my musical tastes are quite eclectic, and I am difficult to disappoint. There is one album from 1968 in this bunch that I'm not really too keen on. Next one, I kind of cover, but of course, doesn't say anything. But it's The Band and the music from Big Pink, which Big Pink was the house that they recorded this in. So another great one. Bob Dylan did a lot with the band, toured with them, wrote songs with them, recorded with them at Big Pink. So great stuff. Another one from 68, Van Morrison, Astral Weeks. Van Morrison is someone that I liked a lot of his material, but I didn't have it on vinyl for quite a while. Then I did get, it must have been kind of like a greatest hits that I got on cassette, maybe in the 1980s. But this album, while it doesn't have a lot of what you might consider recognizable songs, is really an amazing album. Really, really amazing. Highly recommend it. The Kinks. This is the Kinks, the Village Green Preservation Society. I liked the Kinks as a little kid, like around 9 years old. My sister had the Kinks' greatest hits at that time, and I really, really, really dug that album. But I never collected or listened much to the Kinks. Didn't hear them much until the 1970s. And the song Lola, and I liked them, that song, but I still didn't buy anything. But now I have plenty of Kinks. Then another one from 1968, Cream, Wheels of Fire. I remember being about 10 or 11 years old and hearing this for the first time. And, I was an instant fan of Cream, just that heavy, heavy sound. And the live rendition of Crossroads here. but so many other great songs, and this White Room probably continues to be one of my favorite Cream songs. Moving down through the pile, uh, this one from Big Brother and the Holding Company, Cheap Thrills. Um, this is, of course, known for, this is where Janis Joplin got her start with Big Brother and the Holding Company. Not necessarily on this album. I'd have to double check on that. But anyway, it's great stuff. I mean, a lot of people, I think, maybe get this because of Janis Joplin, and the great songs that are on here that she's singing, like Ball and Chain, Summertime. So, it's a great record for that. But you should seriously check out some of the other releases that Big Brother and the Holding Company put out because they're really, really good. Very hard bluesy rock. Here's one. This is, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. We're only in it for the money. The cover being a parody of the Sgt. Pepper's album. Frank Zappa is that recording artist and performer, composer, probably more than any other popular music celebrity. Frank Zappa was a composer. A singer-songwriter is one thing, but a composer is really something else. And his music, as I said earlier, I want to collect everything that's ever been put out there. And for a while, I wasn't sure if I was going to get bootlegs, but I think I'm going to do that as well. So I'm a completist when it comes to this. This is the Zappa Records re-release of this. I'm still looking for some OGs of this release that are not only reasonably priced but in good condition. I've seen them out in the stores, but they're not always in great condition. Then this one was an interesting one. All right, so Small Faces, Ogden's Nut Gone, the Ogden Special Nut Gone, Celebrated Flake Tobacco. Weird kind of cover, very psychedelic album. I never listened to Small Faces very much, and I missed out a lot. So this was on a list of, like the 500 greatest, records, rock and roll, blues, whatever, that Rolling Stone did, that list. And this was on the list. And then one day I saw it in a store. So I bought it and really do like it. Been reading some books about soul music. And again, Aretha Franklin, very familiar. I have some compilations on CD, but I didn't have anything on vinyl. And Lady Soul, this is the one to get. Chain of Fools, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, Groovin', Since You've Been Gone, Good to Me as I Am to You. A lot of really, really good songs on this. She was also recording with, I'm trying to remember now if it was Stax or if it was Muscle Shoals. I got a feeling that it was probably Stax. I'm going to have to, investigate that. But they kind of lured her away from Motown. And I just noticed on here that Eric Clapton has a role in this album in one of the songs. Dr. John Grigri, that was released in 1968. And got this on very cool, lime green vinyl, or kind of a yellowish green vinyl. Great stuff. And I wasn't all that familiar with Dr. John, not until much later, when he had that hit, Right Place at the Wrong Time. What is sweet about this album is that it's got uh, Gilded Splinters, which I knew the song Gilded Splinters from Humble Pie, from their live album Rockin' the Fillmore, which is just an outstanding live album. Just great. And I didn't realize that, he was the one who wrote it. And his original version of that song is just really great as well. So, this is a new release or re-release, so it should be fairly easy to find and not be that expensive. Now, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I always want to try and get the name correct on this, but it's the child, or the man is child to the son, or something like that. Let me quickly look at my list here. Child is father to the man. That's the correct one. I never listened to Blood, Sweat, and Tears very much while I was in high school, or before that even. And I missed a lot. I mean, this is a really, really good album. This is an album that every collector should have. I don't listen to it a lot, but when I do, I enjoy it really every single time. So, an album that came out when I was 10 years old. And moving along, Moody Blues, In Search of the Lost Chord. This is the album that a lot of people say, hey, this is when the Moody Blues discovered drugs. So yeah, they've got Legend of a Mine about Timothy Leary, Dr. Livingston, I presume, Ride My Seesaws, a lot of great, great songs on here. I've always liked the Moody Blues ever since Days of Future Past. Really liked their stuff. Never had I did have a chance to see them in, I think it was 1980 when I lived in Tucson, but I didn't make it to that show. I think that was Long Distance, what was the album? Long Distance Voyager or Long Distance Runner? I can't remember. But it was the tour for that. And I did talk to some people who did go to that show, and they said it was great. This was, I got this one in the last couple of months. And this is Blue Cheer. And it is Vinspus Eruptum. And really good. Hard, psychedelic blues rock. Really good stuff. And they do have a cover on here of Summertime Blues. So it's kind of an EP. It's not a full album necessarily, but great music, great blues, hard rock, psychedelic. And the next one, the Monkees. So the bird, the bees, and the Monkees. As a kid, I was not a fan necessarily of the Monkees. I watched their TV show, but I was, it was kind of at the same time like, who do you like, the Monkees or the Beatles? And that was kind of the thing that we kids were doing. And so I was like being really snobby and all that. Oh, well, I'm a Beatles fan, The Monkees, that's a manufactured group. Well, yeah, they were a manufactured group put together for a TV show. However, they were good musicians. And in particular, Mickey Dolenz for sure, Peter Tork. They were all good musicians, but I think the key is that Michael Nesmith, really turned out to be quite the singer-songwriter, and I have one of his albums as well. All right, 1968, Iron Butterfly, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. This is the one that I'm not all that hot on. I got it because I just think I should. So I'm not even sure necessarily of the collectability of this particular label. This album is everywhere. You can get it for cheap. Even in really good condition, you can get it for cheap. Of course, famous for the song Inagata Davida. I remember in 6th grade, a classmate, some of my classmates, they actually had a band, and they played this. Our teacher let them bring their equipment into the classroom, and they played this song. Yeah, that was pretty cool. They did a decent job with it. And I did see what was left of Iron Butterfly play live at a bar in Tucson in, like, again, maybe 1979 or 1980. I can't be sure. I think it was only the drummer was the only person in the group from the original group. But yeah, they're okay. But it's not an album I'm just really all that hot about. Canned Heat, Livin' the Blues, 1968. Great album. Really good stuff. I mean, this is, going up the country is, a very recognizable song of theirs. Of course, it's being used in commercials now. But the two-part side each of Refried Boogie, that's a good one. Very psychedelic, very way out there, but also very bluesy boogie music, good, and Pony Blues, great songs. Nice album. Got a lot of ringware. I'm going to have to start keeping the wax on the outside instead of keeping it inside the cover. Another one from 1968, Amboy Duke's Journey to the Center of Your Mind. Or of the mind, I should say. This was Ted Nugent, who I have mixed feelings about. He is an incredible guitar player. There is no doubt about that. He is incredible, skilled, awesome, hard rock shredder. Just when he's, as a person, never mind. But this is a good album. The whole side 2 is kind of a journey, and it can be looked at as being in sequence as opposed to just a bunch of songs like side 1. So, great one from 1968. Getting close to the end of my pile here. Now, this is kind of interesting, all right? So, this Ramsey Lewis album, you'll see I have in here Mother Nature's Son, because that's the record, all right, that was released in 1968. And Mother Nature's Son is a group of Beatles covers that Ramsey Lewis did. Cry Baby Cry, Good Night, Sexy Sadie, all from the White Album. Ramsey Lewis really was blown away by the songs on the White Album. And so he did this album as a cover and homage to the Beatles and the White Album. The thing is that I was looking at this, and it was kind of a cool cover. And at the time, I didn't have any Ramsey Lewis. So I took it up to the guy at the counter and I said, "Hey, could you play this? I'm not familiar with this." And so he puts it on, and I'm kind of looking at the album, and then I start hearing the songs, and I'm going, "Wait a minute, those aren't the songs that are on the cover here." And he realized, oh no, so that it was the wrong record inside the cover, which happens from time to time. And I said, "Well, I kind of like the way it sounds. It's too bad you don't have the cover to go with it." And he says, "Hey, you can have it for $1." So I got the cover for Another Voyage, but inside is Mother Nature's Son, and that's why I had that little note stuck in there. And then last but not least, for 1968, is Donovan and the Hurdy-Gurdy Man. Again, Donovan was one of those musical artists, singer-songwriters that I knew about and knew the big songs like Hurdy-Gurdy Man or Mellow Yellow, etc. But I wasn't really familiar with anything beyond what I heard on the radio. And I didn't have any of his records, but when I started buying them and listening to him, he is a very, very skilled singer-songwriter. His music has great depth, really enjoyable stuff. So if you're only familiar with his hits, I would definitely recommend that you start picking up some of these. You can find them for pretty inexpensive in record stores. Some of them have been re-released. I have Mellow Yellow that's on a reissue on yellow vinyl. So, I mean, there are some of them that are coming out, but even some of the earlier pressings like this one are going to be pretty inexpensive, even though they may not necessarily be that common when you're, browsing through records. All right, so that's like 26 minutes here to go over just my birth year and the decade when I'm 10 years old. So, part two, and potentially a part three, we'll be looking at the other decades, the music of my decades. I did also make a list of, because there were some great releases when I was 15, so like, a half decade. But they start to get smaller, my lists, as I get older. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got some ideas. If you saw something that you hadn't heard of them before, or you were unfamiliar with but had been thinking about, these are all really, really great choices to add to your record collection. And be sure to check out my other videos and come back, please subscribe to the channel. And I hope to see you again. Thank you very much and enjoy your music.